A man sat silently at the corner of a roadside bar, leather colors draped across his back like a flag. A group of strangers thought it was funny to spit on them. What happened next wasn't just about bikers or respect. It was about love, loss, and the weight of loyalty. Before we begin, tell us where in the world are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Your every comment, gift, and membership helps us bring more heart-touching stories to your life. The leather vest wasn't just clothing. It was a story stitched in scars, miles, and brotherhood. Jack, a quiet man in his late 40s, wore his colors not as decoration but as remembrance. Every patch, every thread carried names of brothers gone too soon. Road accidents, cancer, overdoses, bar fights that turned into funerals. To outsiders, the vest was a symbol of fear, but to Jack it was sacred ground. He never explained that to strangers. He didn't need to. He just carried it like a priest carries scripture. Jack wasn't the kind of biker you saw in movies. He didn't throw fists without reason. He lived in silence, working as a mechanic during the day, riding at night when the world grew quiet. The roar of the Harley drowned out the loneliness that had followed him since his brother, Mike, died. And those colors, his club's patch, were all he had left of family. That night, he wasn't looking for trouble. He just wanted a beer, a seat in the corner, and memories he could hold without speaking. But sometimes the world doesn't respect what it doesn't understand. It was a small-town roadside bar, neon lights flickering against rain-stained glass. Inside, laughter sloshed around with the whiskey. Young men, already too drunk to notice the weight of their words, filled the room with noise. Jack walked in quietly, boots echoing on the worn wood floor. Heads turned, as they always did, when a man in colors entered a room. Most people looked away. Some whispered. A few stared too long, mistaking curiosity for courage. Jack ignored them. He had learned years ago that eyes were cheaper than fists. He walked to the far corner, ordered a single beer, and sat down. The jukebox played an old Springsteen song, something about broken dreams and highways. At the bar, the young men kept drinking. Their laughter grew sharper, their shoulders squaring with liquid bravery. One of them nudged another and pointed toward Jack. They didn't see a man with memories on his back. They saw a target. The bartender glanced at them, then at Jack. His eyes carried the weight of warning, but he said nothing. Silence can sometimes be more dangerous than words. That silence was about to shatter. Started small, like disrespect often does. One of the men staggered across the room, his drink sloshing, his grin crooked with cruelty. He stopped at Jack's table, leaned too close, and said words only drunk mouths find funny. Jack didn't answer. He lifted his beer, sipped slowly, eyes fixed on nothing. The silence burned the drunk more than any insult. He leaned back, spat onto the floor, then turned, smirked, and spat again. This time, the spit landed on Jack's colors. For a moment, the bar froze. Even the jukebox seemed to hesitate mid-song. Jack didn't move. His eyes lowered to the wet stain spreading across the sacred patch on his back. His knuckles tightened around the bottle, not out of rage, but something quieter, heavier. The drunk laughed, slapped his buddy on the shoulder, and staggered back toward his seat. He thought it was over. He thought he had won. But respect doesn't stay buried, especially not in the heart of a man who has buried too many brothers. Jack stood slowly, shoulders square, but he didn't speak. He walked past the bar, past the laughter, past the echo of disrespect. He pushed open the door and disappeared into the night. For a moment, the young men celebrated their false victory, clinking glasses with arrogance. Then came the sound, the low, distant rumble of engines. First it was 1, then 2, then 5, then 10. The ground seemed to shake as headlights carved through the night, flooding the parking lot. The neon bar sign flickered red against chrome. The door opened, and Jack walked back in. But this time he wasn't alone. Behind him came the Hell's Angels. Men with weathered faces, leather vests heavy with stories, eyes that had seen enough violence to know when it was needed and when it wasn't. They didn't rush. They didn't roar. They entered with the calm of men who knew exactly who they were. The bar's air grew thick. The young men's laughter turned into silence. For the first time all night, they felt small. And Jack finally spoke. Jack's voice was calm, low, the kind of tone that makes you lean in because it carries weight. "Do you know what these colors mean?" he asked. His back still turned, so they could see the patch glistening under the bar light. The drunk who spat tried to laugh, but it cracked in his throat. His friends shifted uncomfortably, their bravado leaking out like air from a punctured tire. Jack didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His brothers spread around the bar, silent as shadows, their presence louder than any words. The bartender stood back, hands on the counter, eyes steady. He had seen this lesson before. Jack turned, slowly, meeting the drunk's eyes. "This isn't cloth. This isn't decoration. Every thread is a name. Every stitch is a funeral. And you put spit on it." The drunk swallowed hard. His lips trembled, but no words came. Jack didn't swing. He didn't shout. Instead, he did something worse. He held the silence. A silence that pressed down until the drunk's shoulders caved under its weight. Respect isn't taught by fists. It's taught by presence. From the far end of the bar, a man older than Jack stepped forward. His beard was white, his hands calloused, his eyes sharp but heavy with years. He had been riding longer than most of the young men had been alive. His vest told stories, faded patches, scars of leather worn thin. He placed his hand gently on Jack's shoulder, then looked at the drunk who spat. His voice cracked, deep and raw. "Kid, you don't spit on colors. Not because we'll break you, but because these colors hold ghosts. Every patch here is a gravestone we carry so they don't die twice." The bar was so quiet, you could hear ice melting in glasses. The drunk tried to mutter something about a joke, about not meaning it. But the words stumbled and fell. The old man shook his head. "Respect isn't about fear. It's about knowing there are things bigger than you. Things you don't mock." He didn't need to raise his hand or his voice. The truth in his tone was heavier than any punch. And for the first time that night, the young men began to understand. Jack sat back down, slowly removing his vest and laying it on the table as if it were fragile glass. His fingers traced one small patch at the bottom, a name stitched in red. The drunk's eyes followed, confused but unable to look away. "This one," Jack said softly, "was my brother Mike. He died at 27. We buried him with his vest, but I keep this patch here so he still rides with me." His hand moved to another, slightly frayed. "This one was Danny. Laughed louder than anyone I've ever met. Gone in a crash at night." Jack's voice trembled, but he didn't stop. He listed name after name, each one heavier than the last, until the table itself seemed to sink under the weight of memory. The bar wasn't a bar anymore. It was a church, and Jack's words were prayers. The drunk's hands shook. His throat tightened. For the first time, he realized he hadn't spit on leather. He had spit on lives. And in that moment, he wished a fist had hit him instead. Bruises fade. But guilt doesn't wash off so easily. One of the younger angels, his jaw sharp, his fists clenched, took a step forward. The air grew thick with the possibility of violence. His eyes burned toward the drunk as if one punch could restore honor. A couple of the young men shrank back, their bravado collapsing into panic. But the old man lifted his hand. "No," he said firmly. "Not tonight." The biker froze mid-step, his chest rising and falling like a caged animal. Slowly, he stepped back. The room exhaled. The choice not to hit spoke louder than fists ever could. Jack leaned in closer to the drunk, his voice low but steady. "We could hurt you. We won't. But we'll leave you with something worse. knowing you disrespected more than just men. You disrespected the dead. And they don't forget. The drunk's face drained of color. He wanted to disappear, but there was nowhere to go. The lesson was already written into the silence pressing down on him. Respect had been taught without a single blow. But the night wasn't finished yet. Something deeper was still to come. The drunk's knees trembled as he stood. He looked at Jack, then at the old man, then at the circle of leather vests watching him. His voice cracked when he finally spoke. I'm sorry. The words were small, almost swallowed by the room, but they carried more weight than any excuse. Nobody moved. Nobody smiled. Jack studied his face, searching for truth in the apology. After a long silence, he nodded once, barely visible, but enough. The drunk swallowed hard, then did something nobody expected. He reached for a napkin from the bar, bent down, and gently wiped the spit from Jack's vest. His hands shook so violently it almost slipped, but he kept going until the patch was clean again. It wasn't perfect. The stain would never truly leave, but the act mattered. The bar was no longer filled with laughter or arrogance. It was filled with something heavier, humility. The young man sat down, his shoulders slumped, no longer a fighter but a boy realizing the weight of his mistake. And for the first time, the angels allowed a small silence of forgiveness. The old man broke the silence, his voice carrying both pain and pride. You want to know what these colors mean? Sit down. I'll tell you. The drunk and his friends sat, unsure if it was command or invitation. The bikers circled closer, not to intimidate, but to witness. He began to speak, not of violence or crime, but of brotherhood. He told them about cold nights riding with no destination, about funerals where engines roared instead of hymns, about standing by each other when the rest of the world turned its back. He spoke of broken homes, lost jobs, and addictions that nearly swallowed them, but how the club pulled men back from the edge. These colors, he said, holding up his vest, are about love as much as fear. They're about showing up when nobody else will. They're about family for men who had none. The young men listened, their arrogance stripped away. Some lowered their heads, realizing for the first time that respect wasn't about leather or metal. It was about the invisible bond that kept broken men alive. Jack looked at them quietly, knowing the lesson had begun to sink in. From behind the counter, the bartender finally spoke. His voice was calm, but it trembled slightly. I've been pouring drinks here for 30 years. I've seen bikers walk in, and I've seen fights spill blood on this floor. But I've also seen them carry their wounded out, patch each other up, ride for hours just to bury a brother. He set a glass down hard, the sound sharp in the silence. You spit on their colors? You might as well spit on every grave they've dug with their own hands. The young men stared at the ground. The drunk who spat wiped his eyes, shame cutting deeper than whiskey ever could. The bartender leaned closer. What you did tonight could have ended with broken bones. Instead, you're leaving with something heavier, understanding. Don't waste it. His words fell like stones in a still pond, rippling across the room. Even the angels listened, some nodding quietly, acknowledging the truth. And for the first time all night, the young men didn't see monsters in leather. They saw men who carried grief the world never noticed. The angels finished their drinks without another word. Jack lifted his vest, slipped it back over his shoulders, and fastened it slowly. The wet stain had dried, but the patch still glistened under the neon light. He wore it anyway, not out of pride, but out of promise. Without signal or command, the bikers stood. The scrape of chairs on wood echoed like thunder. They filed out together, boots heavy, the room trembling in their absence. Moments later, the engines roared alive. Headlights lit up the windows, and the ground shook beneath the weight of chrome and steel. One by one, they pulled out of the lot, the sound blending into a single heartbeat. Inside, nobody spoke. The young men sat frozen, staring into their drinks. The bartender wiped the counter slowly, as if erasing the night's tension. The ride outside was not a celebration. It was a ride of silence, a reminder that sometimes presence is the loudest statement. And as the sound of engines faded into the night, the lesson they left behind lingered like smoke. When the bar finally emptied, the young man who spat remained at his table, staring at the floor. His friends had gone, too ashamed or too afraid to stay. But he couldn't move. Something inside him had shifted, and the weight of it held him down. He thought of his own brother, someone he hadn't spoken to in months after a bitter fight. He thought of his father, buried last year, and how he never wore anything to remember him. He thought of the leather vest, heavy with stories, and realized he had never carried anything that mattered. For the first time in years, tears slid down his face. He wasn't crying because he was scared. He was crying because he finally understood the depth of what he had mocked. He left the bar quietly, walking into the night alone. The road stretched out before him, empty, endless. And somewhere deep inside, a small vow formed. Never again would he mistake silence for weakness or leather for decoration. The lesson wasn't finished. It was only beginning. Miles away, the angels rode under the blanket of night. Wind rushed against leather, engines thundered like drums. Jack led the pack, eyes fixed on the horizon, heart heavy but calm. As he rode, he whispered a prayer, one he always spoke after moments like this. For Mike, for Danny, for all the brothers gone. Ride with me still. The stars above seemed to flicker in answer. His chest loosened, as if the road itself carried their spirits. Behind him, his brothers rode in silence, every headlight a candle in the darkness. Jack didn't know if the drunk truly understood. Maybe he would forget by morning. Maybe he wouldn't. But that didn't matter. What mattered was that for 60 seconds, just 60 seconds, the weight of their colors had been seen for what it was, sacred. He twisted the throttle, the engine screaming against the night, and felt, for just a moment, that his brother's laughter echoed in the wind. And in that sound, there was peace. Back in town, the young man walked alone, jacket zipped tight against the cold. The echo of engines still rang in his ears. He knew he'd never wear colors, never ride with them, but he had been given something unexpected. Respect. Not demanded, not beaten into him, but given through truth. He picked up his phone and, with trembling hands, called his brother. The voicemail beeped, and his voice cracked. Hey, it's me. I'm sorry. I miss you. I don't want us to waste time fighting anymore. He hung up, his chest shaking, but lighter. He didn't know if his brother would answer tomorrow or next week. But the call itself was a start. Sometimes it doesn't take fists or fury to change a man. Sometimes it only takes 60 seconds of silence, the weight of ghosts, and the sound of engines fading into the night. Respect isn't about fear. It's about love, loyalty, and remembering the people we've lost. And that night, in a small-town bar, a drunk boy learned what every biker already knew. Colors are never just cloth. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs reminding of respect, loyalty, and love. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and press the bell icon, because every week we bring you stories of ordinary people carrying extraordinary truths.